Woman! Whoa, man! Whoa, man!
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Long Overdue podcast. This week I'm talking to a good friend of mine, Gabriel, who I met back in 2015 when we both went to university together. She identifies as a trans woman, and I thought it was important for me and her to have a kind of open conversation and dialogue around what it means to be trans from her perspective, to kind of just explore what her journey was like in kind of that process of self-discovery and self-expression, and what it means for her to just kind of grow into the person that she has always felt that she was meant to be. It's a really lovely conversation. It's funny. Me and Gabe get on like a house on fire, and you know, she provides me with the space where I can just kind of ask questions that are just completely non-judgmental, and it's just an interesting conversation to listen to. And I think it's important for people like myself and her to kind of have these honest conversations, because it just shows that people can have, you know, tough and honest conversations in safe spaces, like, and across platforms like podcasts. So yes, enjoy the episode. You'll join us where Gabriel probably waffled on for 7 minutes and didn't even realise what question I asked her. So that's just a little flavour of what she's like as a person, but it's a great conversation and I hope you enjoy.
Whoa, man!
What was your question? Is it when did I come out? I just kind of
What did you
started
say
talking about
half
on
an
a
hour ago?
tangent.
I was just kind of saying, you know, when did you kind of like know that you were a female?
Well, yeah.
Like when maybe was there
When
like a light switch
okay,
moment, or was it just kind of like a natural progression of?
a light switch moment is when I was in uni.
Mhm.
As you know, my uni work, I've done a lot of work with the LGBT and transgender community. When I was in university, that's when I started to question myself. I was like, am I transgender? Because every time I dressed up as a girl, as you know, I go out when I was in uni sometimes in a completely different outfit.
Mhm.
I feel a lot better. I feel a lot more confident. I feel a lot more happier with myself. And also, there was a time when I was in uni that I just felt uncomfortable with my body. And at that time, I thought I was just fat. So I went to the gym. I worked hard. I lost a lot of weight, and I still wasn't
Mhm.
happy. But I'm happy when I'm dressed up as a girl. So it just kind of that just kind of played in my head a lot and a lot, like throughout university, especially when I'm studying. I did it for my dissertation. I did it for my final major project, everything. So that just kind of stuck in my head,
Mhm.
really. So that's when I've just turned around and say that, "Do you know what? That's it. I'm going to accept myself." And that is the first step. I was like, I'm going to accept myself and I'll start dressing up as a girl on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis and see how that goes. I think you probably have seen me go from that. Like I just completely
Yeah.
switched that
Well,
every day. I
I
just
do
started
remember, and I
dressing as a
think that
girl.
kind of goes back to the reason we kind of even got talking about this and saying, oh, well, let's kind of talk about, you know, this on a podcast, because it was kind of born out of me expressing me feeling uncomfortable about not being prepared to kind of see you kind of like outwardly projecting as a woman to go on a night out, because I'd only ever known you at that point, up until that point, as just kind of like Gabe. You'd kind of come into uni, you'd wear like joggers and like a t-shirt or a hoodie or whatever, and you wouldn't outwardly project this feminine female, this like woman, as
Yeah,
compared to that first time when we went out and you came down the stairs in this kind of like white jumpsuit.
you can just kind of I bet you could see just the aura just changes around me since the first time you saw that. But that was daunting because again, I was put in a situation where I don't know many
Yeah,
people. I've spoken to you maybe a few times at that time, but I had to do it.
yeah,
Otherwise, because I've learned from my previous mistake when I kind of hid it for a long time
yeah.
who I am. it does eat you up. It really does eat you up. So when I got to university and I was again in an environment where it's completely different, I had to make sure that people around me knew who I was
Mhm.
rather than not, because it's just it's better to feel it, and I feel better
Yeah.
about myself as
And
well.
in that moment as well, because it wasn't that like, I was like, oh my God, who is this person? Because at the same
Do
at
you
the
know?
same time, it was kind of like, oh well, like it felt natural. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, what the fuck? Like this came out of nowhere. It was like, oh
Yeah.
well, obviously,
Oh well, obviously that's gonna
yeah.
happen at some
But
point.
then within that as well, it's kind of like because you're just reflecting on that moment because there's kind of like two sides of this coin of people in society kind of wrapping their head around what transgender means and transgender people, and also your lived experience of being trans and kind of understanding who you are. And in that moment, you kind of saying there that, like, oh, well, I felt comfortable, but at the same time uncomfortable because, you're kind of going through this phase of change and people are going to
Yeah,
find out and conversations are going to rise or whatever. And me at the same time kind of feeling a certain level of discomfort because I was like, oh my God, like I'm now in a position where I need to kind of be met with my own thoughts around what does this kind of feel
yeah,
like for me. I now need to enter into the conversation in a way that kind of allows me to kind of grow and understand it more versus me kind of maybe going the other way and thinking, oh, well, this feels uncomfortable. I don't really know how to have these conversations. So I'm just kind of not gonna kind of, I don't know,
yeah.
hang out with you anymore or just kind of distance myself because I,
No,
I don't know how to kind of be in that space.
it is different when, for example, when it was with you, I didn't feel judged at all. You kind of just like continued on the night, and you did look like shocked at the
Yeah.
start, but there was no judgment, there's nothing, so I felt comfortable. But there was times when I was in uni, like for example, I was working in a bar. I think it was Tiger at the time, and then I went out as a girl, not even with them, just with my
Mhm.
friends, and then one of them saw me, and then they started a new group chat just to talk about me.
Okay. That is,
So it's complete. That again, that's why I'm kind of careful of of me coming out of my shell, and I do it in a
yeah.
gradual basis rather than just like because people have different perceptions, and it is bad, but I can't really control how they're gonna
Yeah.
feel. It's at the end of the day, it is what it is.
It's also
Um,
that weird thing as well of, you've spent so many years of your life getting to the space that you're at now where you feel comfortable in the skin you're in, you feel like you're the person you want to be. But then also being met with, I suppose, this cycle of having to let people know that you're transgender,
do you know what it
is
is?
kind
It's
of,
it's
what's
really
that like?
hard because like most of my friends now, for example, a couple of my friends that I'm really close with now didn't know when they first met me because I moved to Leeds, and then I just kind of met them on a night out, and then we ended up being friends, and they didn't know. And one of my friends called me. She felt a little bit betrayed that I didn't tell
Hmm.
her at the time when I first met her. She probably realized 4 months down the line we've been friends, and then one of my friends just kind of said it, out of the blue, and then she was like, "What?" And she felt a little bit betrayed. But I had to tell her that I can't just go around like meeting people and tell them about my gender and
Yeah,
sexuality when I just said that it's something more, a bit more private and a little bit more intimate in my eyes.
yeah.
And she understood that, and she was like, you know what, that's perfectly understandable. But that's one of my problems. It's really hard to just, you don't just blur out, for example, that, oh yeah, I'm trans. When do you ever say that in a
Yeah.
conversation with a stranger? Like, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's exactly something that's quite natural. And just be like, oh, by the way, just so
Oh
you're
yeah,
aware.
by the way, yeah, exactly. So, and if it doesn't come up in a conversation, then I'm not gonna talk
Yeah,
about it because again, I don't want it to be because I've always said I am more than my gender. I am smart, I'm strong. I feel like I'm
mhm,
motivated. I'm a lot more than what my gender is. Of course, that's part of my identity, but the other things about myself is a lot stronger than whatever the hell I was born in or what the hell I'm presenting as,
Yeah.
basically.
And like, because I've seen a few stories from other trans women where they've kind of expressed the uncomfortable nature of at times being on a night out or being out, where people have kind of all of a sudden kind of clocked that, oh, this is a trans woman, and that kind of personalities change, and there's kind of became this certain level of discomfort of like, oh, a guy's chatting you up, and then kind of realize that like, oh god, like you're a trans
No,
woman, and
it is true.
like what
It's true.
again, like, have you experienced that? What's that like? How does that make you feel?
Yeah, so for example, as I said, if you tell someone about that, they already put you in a box.
Hmm.
And whether that be a negative or a positive box, you're in a box
Yeah.
anyway. Like for example, I had a conversation with my boyfriend now, because we went on a night out with his workmates, and then he was drunk, and then he ended up saying to his workmate, "Oh, my girlfriend's coming," and then there's a couple of girls in there that my boyfriend told what my gender is
Hmm.
basically. And I had to tell him, like, you need to calm down. You can't just say it to people, like to strangers,
Yeah.
because first, it's my safety. I don't know what these people are going to say. I don't know what their opinions are and stuff like that. It's easier for me to for me to say it for myself. It's not something for my boyfriend to
Yeah.
say to other people, basically. But you know, when they met me, they just started to talk about, maybe they were drunk at the same time. They just started talking about, oh yeah, I'm part of the LGBT too. You know, they kind of, it's their perception of, like, if they didn't know anything about that, the first conversation we would have had is completely different. We would
Mm.
have been like, oh my God, my name's Gab, how are you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a completely different conversation when they first met me.
Yeah.
And and yes, it's the negative things. Like I have had many stories of people clocking me and stuff like that, but I'm too sassy to care, if I'm honest. But
You
there was one
sassy?
time I was
Huh?
like, do I care?
What?
Like what? What? I'm trans? Oh my God, yes. Like yeah, but there was I remember this one time I cried actually. I must have been second year of uni because I was living in Jessamine. I was dressed up as a girl. I didn't know that this guy didn't know I was trans. I had no idea. I thought he knew that I was just dressing up and stuff like that. And then we ended up kissing. I ended up bringing back to my house. I didn't think I was passable at the
Hmm.
time. I was like, and then I took my makeup off and then kind of went in the bed and he was in shock. And I was like, I thought you knew, but he just kind of got up and then left. And I started to bawl my
Uh-huh.
eyes out because to me at the time, if, for example, if I was born girl, like at birth, then I wouldn't have this problem.
Mm.
You know, I have to go through this type of problem that not many people go through. And at the time, I was young and I just started to bawl my
Yeah.
eyes out, basically, in the corner of my room. But I've realized growing up that everyone goes through different shit. So
Yeah.
here you go.
And before you met who you're with now, like, did you were you off? Was that always in the back of your mind when you were like meeting people that you might have a situation where it's kind of like, do I need to say something? Do they know what's this going to be like? Or
Well, it's not. It's completely different to me, actually. I have to make sure if it's on a dating app,
yeah.
I have to make sure that these people know because I can't have them go on a date with me without them
Yeah.
knowing, basically, because it's stupid. But I have been on a couple of dates where people that I have met in person. I used to work in a bar, so people asked me out on the bars all the
Mhm.
time, and I said yes to a couple of them because they were very good looking. So I have been in a couple of dates where I haven't told them, but again, it was just a day. If free food, I went there for free food and free drinks. They were nice, but
The burgers were
but
nice
yeah,
though.
yeah, the burgers were nice, but yeah, I didn't feel like again I will only tell someone that doesn't know if we're ever gonna engage sexually
Yeah.
or anything like that, or it didn't. So, or if we're ever gonna have kids or anything like that, I have to have this
Yeah.
conversation. But we didn't, so I didn't feel like I had to. Again, it's for my own safety.
And yeah, even within that as well, and I kind of tried to word this in the like message I sent you on Messenger as well, but I think it just came out worse than kind of like how it is in my head. But it's kind of more just around the topic of, society's perception of gender in the kind of most kind of like basic sense of like, if you're a boy, you've got a penis, if you're a girl, you've got a vagina. And I know that with trans women, there isn't that kind of like need to kind of be like, oh, if I identify as a trans woman, I then need to kind of go the full hog and, get like top surgery, bottom surgery to kind of fulfill myself as a
It's
woman. And
well,
I
yeah.
suppose the question
Sorry.
is, it's kind of like, what's your, how like, what's your kind of like expression of like what it means to be a woman?
Well, as I said, it's people's perception and everyone's experience is completely
Mm.
different. And to me, being a woman is a state of
Yeah,
mind. It's I love women, right? I love women more than I love men. I watch women. I am the woman who I am now because I've watched so many women in my life. And to me, being a woman is a state of mind. It's being powerful and being sexy at the same
mm.
time. It's nothing about what my body looks
Yeah,
like, anything like that. I have, don't get me wrong, I have insecurities and stuff like that. And to some transgender people, that is the thing that makes them cry at night. It's the thing that they can't sleep because of that, because they just keep thinking about it.
mm.
Then yes, the solution for them is for that, but that's not for everyone. I'm not going to tell you what I
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
Alex, unless I am not single. But
You'll have to find out, honey.
but yes, no, body dysmorphia is real.
Yeah,
It is real in the transgender community. It's because it's media. It's all it's because we watch women now that the women that we look after have a certain kind of
hmm,
image, and they have this, they have that, and you want that as
yeah,
well. But my advice to every transgender woman out there: look at every single woman that you see, not just the famous one. Look at the women that you see on the
hmm,
street. Look at the women that you see on at work. Every single one of them is different, and I promise you, you're not that completely different to them. If you look, like for example, me, one of my insecurities is I've got quite a broad shoulders, probably not as anything like ridiculous, but I'm really insecure about that, for
yeah,
example. But I have met many women with wider shoulders than me, and they look
mm,
amazing. And I'm like, why am I ever insecure about this? I think that the problem is we kind of like look at women a certain way. They need to have a curvy body and all that
yeah.
stuff. When in reality, women is a state of mind. It is.
Hmm.
And so,
And the
yeah,
thing is as well, like that works both ways, like in regard to just kind of like men, but that kind of like bigger discussion of like men don't really talk about their kind of like body
exactly.
issues. But likewise, I kind of often look at my body and go, fucking
Oh,
hell, look at the state of that.
yeah.
But then I'll be in the gym and then I'll look a bit different. I'm like, it's kind of like it's like a daily thing where sometimes you just wake up and you think I feel good. Other
Yeah.
times you look at yourself and you're like, you know what, like I'm all right.
For example, today I'm like,
Who
look
is
at
she?
me.
Who is this girl staring back at me? So is that a Mulan reference? What's
Exactly.
that?
Yeah, that is Milan. That is Milan.
But from uni, because like knowing you from uni, and I think this is like an equally important thing for me to express is that kind of like meeting you and knowing you and having the conversations that we've had, particularly because you're like very non-judgmental from the perspective, and I think that's more kind of like when you kind of know someone, you're comfortable with someone, you kind of give me the
You-
space to kind of be wrong, kind of say things that are kind of aren't correct, and you'll kind of like be like you can't say that, or and I think I've kind of got a lot again, like being able to kind of talk like this. Like I admire you for kind of providing me the space to be able to kind of have these conversations with you, and vice versa. I admire you for for being able to kind of have the conversations from your perspective as well. And, you know, I learn a lot from you. And I think particularly from a point of view in regard to gaining a sense of self, because it's, you know, the more you kind of get to know someone and you understand their story and their journey and what they've been through, I think particularly as a guy who is a white, straight, cis male, and the world's kind of made for me to kind of be comfortable, you know, there's still a lot of me being uncomfortable in myself that I kind of need to unpick. But kind of knowing
Yeah.
you and knowing what you've been through and like the kind of challenges you've faced, that's kind of like you know, a kind of, you know, that provides confidence for me to kind of be like, well, if Gabe can do it, you know, why can't I? Why can't I go on the same kind of like explorative, expressive journey to kind of figure out who I am, rather than trying to
Hmm.
kind of fit this kind of straight male mold of like, I need to be this guy who's built like a brick shit house and I want to shag loads of ladies. Like, you know, I ain't that guy. I don't want to be that guy. But there was a moment where I felt like I needed to be that guy. But, you know, being around people who are different and talking with them and like understanding their journeys and what they've been through, it kind of like rubs off on you and kind of gives you that confidence to be like, well, I want to do that for myself. I want to understand who I am. And, you know, it's a nice thing to kind of be able to kind of do. But again, that only comes from being around people who are different and kind of understanding their
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, I've never, because I never judge people who want to genuinely learn
Mm,
about the topic. If you make mistakes, fine. Like, I think it's so bad when people kind of make people feel bad when they say something wrong, when they're not being
mm,
malicious. I see it so many times. Like, for example, if you misgender someone, like a lot of people get like pissed off about it straight
yeah,
away, which I get. Like, I get that it's something that's very important to you, but people need to realize that everyone needs to learn
mm,
at some point. It's a learning curve for everyone. And when did I come out? 10 years ago, like when I kind of started doing the things that I did. And from then, the world is completely different. And I think people need to realize that the world moves slowly. It doesn't just, you can't just come out one day and then expect everyone to do what you want to do. Or you need to be understanding as well,
yeah. And you
in a
know,
way.
on your journey, like how has your like mental health been affected by it all? Like, like has that played like a big part in you kind of figuring yourself out as well?
Yes, it did. It did. This is one of the things. One of the things that I regret the most is not doing as well as what I could have done during uni,
Mm,
because as I said, that's when I started to kind of realize. And at the time, I felt like just locking into my room because I was so confused to myself. I didn't know what to do. So I just kind of never went to lectures, as you know. But yeah, I kind of do regret that, not doing well in uni when I really could have asked for help, for other people's
mm,
help. But at the time, I didn't know you could ask for help from
yeah,
people. I've always just kind of like kept it to myself. So I strongly advise to anyone going through anything about gender, talk to someone, speak. It's the best thing you could do rather than keeping it to yourself, because you'll just go downhill from there,
yeah. And
basically.
did you kind of keep it to yourself because you didn't necessarily know how to talk about it, or did you just not want to talk about it?
Do you know what it is? I think that's just my upbringing. I've always been kind of independent in a way, that I've always dealt with my own shit. Um, so that's just my upbringing. I've always just never liked bringing my problems and putting it on other people, which I'm over it now. I do talk about my problems and stuff like
Mm,
that, but back then I wasn't really. So it wasn't anything about my gender or anything. It was just I didn't like help. I want to be able to do this myself, and I did, but I could have done it a lot better if I did ask for help.
yeah. And I think it's hard as well because it's kind of like, particularly when you're going through something that's new to you and you're figuring things out, and the kind of struggle that you kind of face and kind of, you know, figuring things out for yourself, you know, that's hard enough. Never mind then having to kind of understand how you
Gonna
articulate that
say,
and actually
yeah,
speak to someone
articulate
about
it
it.
to other people.
And I think that's
Yeah,
one of the
because
things people don't necessarily understand is that sometimes it's not so much that you don't want to talk about it. as much as sometimes
You don't know how to say
you
it to
don't know
other
how to
people
talk
or
about it.
where to start. Yeah, you don't know where to start. Or first of all, who do you talk to? I'll talk to my parents and stuff like that. But at the time, um, I was a bit further away from my mum because again, I wanted to deal with this
Yeah.
myself. So I was like, who do I actually ask? I didn't had any friends who was transgender at the time, so I didn't have anyone to talk to about the topic. So I just kind of researched. I researched a
Yeah.
lot. That's why a lot of my uni work is about it because I know a lot about the topic,
Mhm.
basically.
And I think I fall in this trap as well, where because I think even recently as well. Again, just you saying there, and it just kind of reminded me that like you didn't know any trans people to kind of talk to,
Mm.
and quite often I've tried to kind of get podcasts together. Like like I don't know many either, and I try to get podcasts together or kind of projects on it because I think it's an important topic to discuss and explore.
Hmm.
And I think there's one occasion where I kind of said to someone like, "Oh, do you know anyone who might be interested in kind of doing it?" But then also kind of thinking now that you've said that, like, is that maybe like an ignorant thing to say to just kind of assume that like, oh, being a trans person, you will also know other trans people and you can kind of point them off in my direction and
Well, again, it
because
depends really where
it's not
you
like
are
there's a kind
living.
of like
It depends.
space within like communities around like the UK where it's like this is where all the
Yeah,
trans
the
people
people.
hang out. This is where you know what I mean? Like
Actually, there is. There's clubs in Manchester, actually, so
fair
there is.
enough.
But it's more of like it depends on your
Yeah.
location, really. For example, I grew up in York, that's in the UK. Not many people. I was probably the only brown person in my school,
Hmm.
so there's not a lot of diversity in there. I think it depends on your location. Like, for example, if you're studying in Manchester, where the gay community is a lot bigger, then sure, if you're trans, you'll probably know someone trans. Probably saw them in a club somewhere or something like that. But at the time when we were in uni, I didn't know anyone. It was because I was probably one of the first few that I'd seen in
Yeah.
Newcastle when I was there. But there's a lot more now, and I know a lot of them as well. So if you need to know anyone, let me know. Give them my number.
I know all the gals. So how then would in order for people to kind of approach a discussion with you, or even would you want people to approach a discussion with you in regard to say if somebody kind of thinks, oh, like I think gay might be transgender, or like they kind of might be thinking like, how do you create a space where people feel comfortable talking to you about it, or is that not something that people should be doing? You know, if that
Well,
makes sense.
it depends. If it's again, it's something very private and very intimate to
Yeah.
me. So if you're just gonna start talking about it, like for example, if in a club or something like that, I'd be like, I'd rather really not
Yeah.
talk about it here because the reason that I will only talk about my experience and who I am is because I want to educate
Yeah.
people, and this is the play. This is not the place for anyone to educate anyone. So, and also it's a little bit degrading as
Mm.
well to kind of go up to someone and ask them if they're trans because these people have worked so
Yeah.
hard to be passable. Most transgender would want to be passable and they've worked so
Mhm.
hard on it. And the last thing you want is to just bring the like for example on a night out, right? Feeling good, feeling sexy, and then someone come up to me, oh my God, are you trans? That just kind of make it me feel a little bit like, oh my God, what is giving it
Yeah.
out? It's there's a time and a
Mm.
place for it. If you want to talk about it, yeah, sure. Like reach out to me and we can talk about it in some place that there's an actual conversation
Yeah.
going on. But in public, it's just not nice thing to talk about
Yeah.
basically.
Don't that to be fair, like knowing you, I don't think there'd ever really be a time to kind of grab you to talk to you anyway, because you'd be too busy twerking on the dance floor or something
Exactly, exactly,
like.
exactly.
Can you
So
not see I'm
I get
busy?
But yeah, there is a time and a place. There is definitely a time and a place. And I think people, and again, everyone's different. As long as there's no malicious content
Yeah.
in it. Just like if you're genuinely asking,
Mm.
then yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's so how has your relationship with your I mean, I'm going to reword that because that's probably a bad way to word it. But do you feel like your relationships with like family, friends improved over time the more you kind of became comfortable in, who you are?
Oh yeah, 100%. Because now that it's all the cards are on the
Mm.
table, basically. So what you see is what you get, and I just feel more comfortable, and I feel like the people around me are also more comfortable with
Yeah.
me. It's just because, I'm an open book. Um, no, but because now that my mum knows and she's accepting and all that stuff, we can act, and I feel now that I'm not going to be judged or anything
Yeah.
like that, so I feel more comfortable around her and talking to her about stuff. But yeah, no, in my relationships are definitely so much better when I became more confident about myself and who I
Yeah.
am.
And what like did that feel like when you were able to kind of express who you were to your, like your mum?
What do you mean?
So like when
Sorry.
you kind of like, because did you come out to her and were you kind of like, look, I need to kind of have this conversation, or was it just kind of something that just over time was just kind of like, okay, like this is,
No, I did come out to my mum, and to be fair, like I used to dress up when I still lived in her
uh,
house, and she didn't know about it. I'd go on a night out all dressed up and stuff, and I'll wait for her to go in her room
okay,
before I can go out, basically. But no, I came out to my mum, and again, she kind of already like, well, fair enough, but she was more concerned about my health
mm,
because obviously being trans, there's hormones and there's stuff going on that you need to take. So she's more concerned about what are the side
yeah,
effects of me transitioning,
mm,
basically. But no, my mom has always been, she knew me since I was born. As I said, I've always like emulated this feminine
yeah,
aura that I literally, so to her it
yeah,
wasn't a
little Gab
surprise.
trotting around in little high heels.
Literally, no, literally, my grandma, because my grandma is it's a school teacher, and she used to have like heels,
Uh-huh.
and I'll wear them like around the house, and I'll put like a long thing on my hair, and then like kind of whip it.
You still do that now anyway.
I still do that. To be fair, I still do that. I'm like, yeah, but yeah. So my mom was just like, you know what? I kind of already knew what was happening, so yeah. But my mum's since then, my mum and our relationship basically has been stronger than
Hmm.
ever because I feel like I can go to her more
Yeah,
because she knows all of me basically now. So I feel like I can tell her
yeah,
anything.
and like it's even speaking about um, you know, the kind of like hormones and things that you kind of have to take. Um, because I've heard stories where, because I'm not entirely sure the ins and outs of like how catered for trans people are in the UK in order to kind of transition and to do it comfortably and safely. Because I think I've read stories where sometimes women are having to kind of buy hormones online because they can't afford them from, you know, again, wherever you kind of get them officially.
Yeah.
But kind of, what's that being like? Like from your experience.
Well, it was a long waiting time basically for me. So long, like maybe two
Yeah.
years or something like that. But I know like many transgender people who just opt out for buying things online. It's just because the waiting times is so long. Especially for example now, if you put in an application in or something like that, it'll probably be 5 years till you get seen by a doctor. So many transgender people just opt into buying things online and just do your research basically. And as I said, I grew up in the Philippines where I've seen so many transgender people, and the healthcare in the Philippines is horrible.
Mm.
There's no healthcare whatsoever. So people just kind of buy whatever they need to buy, really. But it is very dangerous, so please don't do that. Go to your doctor because you need to get your blood checked, you need to check your hormone levels and stuff like that. And it's a very dangerous game if you're just kind of taking things.
Yeah. And because I know recently what like, and was it like a bill was passed or something where it's kind of, or the UK government stopped a bill to going through in Scotland to kind of stop people from transitioning from
I haven't seen that. That looks so, I feel like a really bad transgender. I've never heard of it.
Well, you know, I don't think you need to know the ins and outs of like every kind of like, getting
Every bill
notifications
that's
on your
been
phone.
passed.
Oh, trans news, that's for me. Well, I suppose a better
But
question
yeah,
then is if you don't know that, because apparently I don't either, because I could barely get my words out. Like, how do you feel as like a trans person in the UK? Do you feel safe? Is there certain times where you feel like you don't feel as accepted as a person?
take what I'm gonna say with a grain of salt because it's different. My story is so different to many transgender
Yeah.
people because I literally, the first time I went into the doctor, right, I sat down on the doctor's chair and I was like, I really want to transition. That's what I said to the doctor. And the doctor was like, so you want to transition into a boy? The doctor genuinely thought I was a
Uh-huh.
girl. So I've always been passable. So my story is completely different. I feel safe,
Mm.
yes. Um, but a lot of us don't. A lot of my brothers and sisters don't feel safe. Like, for example, 50% of young transgender women would experience hate crime, and 80% of like transgender people don't feel like they want to report the hate crime to the police because they feel like the police is just gonna not do anything about it. So I feel safe, but many of us don't.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's just because of how I look, because I am very passable that I could literally, even without makeup nowadays, I can just go up and not many people would know. So I'm very lucky in that
Yeah.
way, but not everyone's that way.
Yeah. And I think
So
it's just important for people to hear that as well, particularly from someone who, is part of that community. Because, there's not really many platforms or spaces where, trans people get to share their story from like a personal
yeah,
perspective.
yeah, there really isn't, if I'm honest. There's a lot of transgender like influencers and stuff like that, but again, that what they embody is completely different than what the real transgender people problems
Yeah.
are. So it is really hard. And also, there's not a lot of representation of transgender people in media, and there's only what this like a transgender would only be portrayed in media as kind of like the masculine type that's not very passable and stuff like
Yeah.
that, when in reality many of us you can't even tell. There's many of us that you can't tell, and I feel like our story hasn't been shared at all, apart from Euphoria. Actually, very good series.
Mm.
There's a transgender girl in there, and she's probably the same as me, that she doesn't really talk about it because in the series they didn't talk about it at all, and then we just kind of realized along the
Yeah.
way. But apart from that, the real transgender issues and what's actually going on, there's not a lot of representation,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
So, how do you feel in yourself now?
In myself now, oh my God, am I ever going to be happy about myself? Probably not. But I am so much better. I have grown to, for example, when I came out to my mom, that's just the first step. It's the
Mm.
acceptance. From then, maybe about 5, 6 years ago, from then till now, I am still finding myself, basically. So, for example, the first few years that I came out, I felt like I had to wear so much makeup. I feel like I had to look a certain way and blah, blah, blah. So at that time, I feel like I had to fit into the society's norm, basically. Lockdown happened. I We went to a time where we not going out at all, so I didn't wear makeup whatsoever. And at that time, I started to kind of accepted myself on what I look like without
Mm.
makeup. So I was like, actually, I do look like a girl even without makeup. So why the fuck am I putting this? I'm spending 2 hours a day just to put makeup on, just to try and persuade people to treat me
Mm.
normally when without even makeup I can actually be. So that lockdown really did help me to kind of accept me as a person and who I am after under all need this makeup, with this hair and this clothes. That's the time for me to kind of just sit down and love myself,
Yeah.
basically, in a way. And that did really help. So we got out of lockdown, and then now I want to be more of myself because lockdown, as I said, I stopped doing fashion. I kind of stopped looking after what I wear and stuff like that. And then now that I love myself and I love what I look like under all this, I want to portray my creativity in terms of clothes, and I'm just trying to find that. So literally, since the start that I came out till now, it's still a whole journey for me. So it's still trying to find yourself.
Well, that's a lovely sentiment for yourself. Like, and also just that whole process of like that I feel like everyone's in a constant state of like exploring themselves, understanding themselves as well. And I know your situation's different, but it's nice to kind of also just kind of have that kind of like you know we're all in a kind of state of fluid change and understanding and kind of
That's
like
what,
growth.
yeah.
And there's
I think as a society, we are now that everything's online and we know a lot of stuff, we are so hungry to know every single thing.
mm,
And it's a little bit toxic. Yes, it's good to educate yourself, but you don't need to understand every single thing that you see to accept them,
yeah,
basically. You can just accept them because it's
yeah.
acceptable. Do you know what I mean? You don't need to delve into every little
Yeah,
detail.
we don't all need to write a thesis on it just to kind of get an
Exactly.
understanding. Who would want to anyway? 'Cause I don't have the capacity to even.
I did. I did a dissertation about it. So yes, I did.
And you can
Actually,
see online at.
actually, it's not online. I need to put it up online. But
Oh,
yeah.
be barely readable anyway, Gabe, if it's your work.
If it was probably shit, so we won't publish it anyway.
Well, just to end on, because we're coming up to an hour now, and just to end on an even happier note, um, what is the last time when you felt proud of yourself?
In terms of gender or just in
Just in
general,
general?
really? Just in general. Do you know what? With what's happening with my life at the moment, I am proud of myself every single day. It is. It's one of those things that I looked at myself maybe 10 years ago. I wouldn't have been where I am because of the journey that I went through. So I am grateful. All the hardship, all the crying, and all that, it was all worth it because I'm proud of who I am now and I'm proud of where I am.
And I'm proud of you as well. Honestly, like
Thanks,
just kind of
Alex.
knowing you from
Thanks.
uni and up to this point, just kind of seeing the change in you
Me
and
grow, yeah.
kind of, just having,
And I've always been quiet about it as well.
yeah.
The growth that I've had. As I said, I've never really come out to anyone, so I've always just been a little bit quiet and a little bit in the background. But yeah, I am proud of what I've become, basically.
Well, I massively appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. On the
Thanks,
holiest of
Alex.
Sundays, on the Lord's Day.
The most depressing Sunday I have ever experienced in my life. It's so cold, it's so grey, but thank you very much, Alex, for having me.
No worries.